And I am done. Okay, so I just finished reading The Lonesome Crown by Brian Lee Durfee. This is the last in the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just right now. So this book is a 6 out of 5, if I could possibly give it. This is absolutely incredible in basically every way that a book could rock. This book rocks. It is one of my favorite books that I've ever read in my entire life across any genre, and the best that the 5 Warrior Angels has to offer. I just can't get over how amazing that this book was. It checks every box for me. And I'm doing this series right now where I'm going through my favorite top 100 fantasy books of all time. And I wish I would have reserved a place in the top 5, because this book, I don't know where it would be in that top 5, but it's absolutely there because it's just incredible. Everything about it is just badass. And that's really the key word that I would come back to thinking. And years down the road, when I think about this book, that's the first phrase that's going to come to my head, because that's just constantly what kept happening in this book. I was just wowed and amazed by the characters, the plot, the completely unexpected revelations that shocked me more than any book that I've ever read. Now, I wouldn't say that the revelations were like the greatest that I've ever read, although they were up there. It's that I just truly didn't see them coming, and they were deserved, and I had my expectations on one character fulfilling X prophecy and another fulfilling Y, and I was completely wrong. And I think everybody that reads these books will be completely wrong, because it subverts your expectations in a very beautiful way, and I loved it for what it was. It's got one of the greatest battles that have ever occurred in any book. It's honestly, I don't know a page count because I'm reading on the Kindle and it has like location, which is not page count. But the last battle that happened here had to be, 400 pages. It's crazy. I mean, it starts and you know it's the last battle because all of the books have been leading up to this point. And you're like, I'm only 60% of the way through this book. Is it really going to, are we going to get that? And then we're going to get this crazy long cooldown period where, he tries to answer all the questions. No, that's how long the battle is. There is a couple chapters of like epilogue chapters that are very short, that are, 15 pages total. But yeah, it's all a battle, and it rocks in so many ways. It's incredible writing, and I think it's the best writing to date. I think I've experienced here Brian Lee Durfee becoming a better writer somehow through this all, and that's crazy for me to say also because of how much that I loved the previous 2 books. I'll put links down below, and if you hit up above, you can see a playlist of my previous reviews for the first 2 books in the series. But I thought those were amazing too, and in some of my top favorite books. Both of them are top 20, maybe even top 10, we'll see. I'm just wowed and amazed, and I want everybody that I know to read these books. And I don't know if you're going to love these books as much as me. I hope you do. But I felt like these books were like tailor-made for my tastes. It's a dark, gritty, bloody, surprising, epic story that just bangs in all the perfect ways. So I want to go through the various aspects of this book and kind of break down the things that I like to look at in a fantasy book. And we're going to start with the story. And the story is a perfect 5 out of 5 for me. And I can't talk too much about the story in this book, but I will talk about the overall story about what's going on in the 5 Warrior Angels. So essentially what you have here is many hundreds of years ago, there was an epic battle between good and evil. And demons were defeated by these 5 warrior angels, these incredibly powerful humans that made the demons get stuck back underground and peace on Earth. And the main one of those people was 𝐏𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿. And I might not be saying that right because I'm not listening on audio. I'm reading these books. And since then, there's been a completely division in the main church, the Church of 𝐏𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿, and it's gone in 2 different directions. In the western part of this world, you had one faith, and on the eastern you had another. And in the Far East you had a completely different race of people that are kind of ambivalent to that main conflict. And over the hundreds of years you've had constant warfare between these two, and some of them have almost taken over the world, and another has won back. And when this story starts, you have the Western group here, which are kind of perceived as like the bad guys. They're not. It's a very gray world where, you know, there is no really good and evil. Everybody's got their own particular bad things to them, and they all just believe in their own religion as the truth. And none of them are perfectly accurate, and I think it's a very good outlook. And clearly, Brian Lee Durfee is telling a very cynical tale of religion and the dangers of religion here. And, you know, I don't know this for a fact, but I have to assume that Brian Lee Durfee does not look very positively on religion for the way that he portrays it here. And so, I mean, if you're this huge, you get really offended when people poke at religion, you're going to hate this book, because that's the theme of this book is the dangers of religion. And one of the themes, I'd say. And so, but when this book starts, you have the Western side that is getting ready for the final push into the East for the final battle. And both sides kind of call this fiery absolution. And it is, you know, everybody believes that the final battle is going to occur and their side will win. And they're just prepping for that, and the pieces are getting into motion for this to happen. But clearly the West is dominating. They've already dominated the middle continent. I think there's 3 or 4 main continents, and they're moving on east, and they're winning. And that's where this book kind of takes place. This is a huge multi-POV. I don't know exactly how many different points of view that are here, but I'm guessing in the, you know, a baker's dozen of really solid POVs that we keep bouncing back on, and that get kind of greater importance as the story goes along on some of these characters. And that's really all I can really say about this. This final book takes that story and it takes us to fiery absolution, which is that final battle, and we get to find out what side wins. Is there a side that wins? What's the truth? What is made up? Who is the savior? Is there a savior? And a ton of other questions, almost all of them that get answered, and some questions that left lingering, which I like in a book. I don't like it to be so tidy and just kind of solve everything. I suspect that if I read this again, it would be a lot more clear to me exactly what everything that happens, because I would get a much greater appreciation for the beginning stories here as they moved along. And this is one of those books that you're going to get a tremendous value out of rereading. So yeah, that's the story in a nutshell, and it rocks. It's such a good story. It's got this huge epic feel to it that it just works. Now let's talk about the world building. The world building here is very special. I can just stare at this map and gush at the detail that's put in here. And in a beautiful way, and what I like a lot about world building is when the world is bigger than the events that take place. And what I mean by that is the world feels real. I mean, in a real story, in a real-sized world, there's no way that you'd be able to actually investigate every location, figure out what every single group is doing in every different town. That would be a series that would have to be, you know, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pages long, and that's not what this is. I mean, this is a, 3,000-page overall arc here between the 3 books. I'd say each book's probably about 1,000 pages. They're big, but not that big. And but I love that because it gives you a sense of wonder. You know, this world has many different aspects to it, many different cultures, many different types of you know, some humans, dwarves, ogles, which are kind of like, think of them like kind of ogreish type characters. You've got these kind of elfish type characters that are not elves, but they got the pointy ears. They kind of play that role here, and more. And as the world gets more built up, you'll see a lot more intricacy here played into it. But it's one of those worlds where I'm never going to forget the details of this world, and I'll always remember it, and with a very fond memory. And that's what I want from a solid world here, because a lot of worlds that you'll read just become quickly forgettable, and they blend in with the other fantasy stories that you'll read. Not so here. This is so terribly unique that you just want to spend more time on it, and I'm just desperate to read more about this world, and I doubt that I'll ever get it. I think this is the end of this arc. I don't know that I'm ever going to get another one of these stories. I don't know if I'm ever going to get another book from Brian Lee Durfee, because this was his calling. This was what he wanted to write, since he was a boy, I believe. And it's finally done. And so does he have another story up there? I don't know. I hope so. I desperately hope so, because he's a genius at writing, and I will eagerly suck up any single thing that he writes, even like short stories I'll take up. But I'd love them to be in this world because I just need more of it. Let's talk about the fantasy elements a little bit here, and they're extensive, and they work so well. And it's another 5 out of 5. There's these magical weapons that all have these custom names to them. There's 5 of them, one for each of the 5 warrior angels. There's these magical stones. There's demons. There are these different races that I talked about. There are more things that I don't want to ruin for you that are majorly important to this final story that get kind of revealed here that I wish I could talk to you about, but I don't want to ruin a single thing for you. And I can't even say what they are because they're not really set up in the second story here, The Blackest Heart. And that you'll get surprised at very quickly on in this book. Within the first few chapters, your jaw's going to kind of hit the floor and go, what the hell just happened? I'm here for it, but this is crazy. And did that just happen? It's a lot of that feeling in this final book. And yeah, the fantasy elements are just perfection. Let's go to the characters. And I think the characters are my favorite part. And I loved the characters when this story began. I've come to forever cherish these characters as the story has gone along. And I cannot talk about them all because there are so many of them. But rest assured here with these characters that this story tells this from many different points of view. And it does it from every side of this conflict. And I love it when a story does that. I hate when a wonderful story kind of gets ruined by just telling one side of the story, because there is no one side ever in any conflict. And the story embraces that. So you get many POVs from this kind of Western group and many from the Eastern. And it works so well because in your head as you're reading this first book, you're like, good guys, bad guys. Obviously, that's not the case. That's not what this kind of story ever has tried to be told, and it's not the case here. I mean, you have good guys that by the end of this, you're going to be thinking in a very bad light. You've got bad guys that you're going to be thinking in a rather good light. You've got very relevant characters that will become essentially irrelevant to the story, and you've got irrelevant characters that will become the height of relevance. And it's that last one that I found to be the most special, because I have forever loved when these characters that feel like bit parts to the story become the main show. Think 𝐀𝐮𝐿 from The Faithful and the Fallen. I don't know if I'm saying that name right either, but this is a character that started off, it's just kind of a random point of view, and it's like, why is the story being told? Who is this character? It doesn't matter. And by the end of it, whenever you get to a 𝐀𝐿 chapter, you're like, hell yeah, give me more 𝐀𝐿. This dude's a badass and I want to read more. There's a lot of that feeling in this book, especially in this one. The other ones, there was a little bit there, but this one, it embraces that and ramps it up to 11, and it's just so awesome. I do want to point out 2 characters in particular that I have come to think of as all-time greats. And one of them is this character Liz Hen, who I thought was a little bit annoying in the first book at her constant pessimism. But the way that she talks with this intense cursing in every single moment, it is hysterical by the end of this story. Every time that she gets screen time, she is just giving it to some of the characters. And in such perfect fashion, Brian Lee Durfee knows how to write profanity, and he nails it. I mean, think like if you've read like The Lies of Locke Lamora, and you hear how these characters kind of talk to each other, and they can throw out these insults and this profanity that just makes you just like laugh out loud at how specific and horrific and detailed it can be. It's that, but it's almost better. I mean, it might be the best use of profanity I've seen in any character, and I'm not somebody that just, when characters just throw in random curse words that serve no purpose, it can kind of be like, is this character just trying to be edgy? Is this writer trying to show, yeah, I have an edge too? No, this is Brian Lee Durfee saying, you know that I can write dark, and now let me show you how I can write dark text too. And it's awesome. She is my favorite character from this entire story, and every time that you can see that she's about to say something, it's awesome. And the next character I want to talk about is a dog, and this dog is named Beer Mug. He is without a doubt turned into my favorite animal companion that's ever existed, not just because he is also a badass and shows up in the most incredible moments to take down the most incredible bad guys. He is perfect in his loyalty, what he can pull off, and his dynamic that he has with 𝐏𝐿𝐻𝐿 is so dope. I love that this dog has essentially the hype man in 𝐿𝐻𝐿. This dog will just go for it against things that are 10 times more powerful than this thing should be. And you have this character in the back just, you know, if you don't want to hear cussing, mute me for a minute, but you'll hear 𝐿𝐻𝐿 just like, fuck him up, Beer Mug. Fucking tear his throat out, you know, fucking give it to him, Beer Mug. You're sitting back there and you want to say these things, but you have a character saying them for you, and it's like, yes, give it to him, Beer Mug. It's so good. There's so many characters to talk about, so many amazing characters to talk about, and I want this review to stay under an hour. Otherwise, I would just be talking about it non-stop. But rest assured, the characters are awesome. Let's talk about writing quality. And I'm actually going to give this like a 4.5 out of 5, because the problems that I had in this book, I would classify in this category. Now, I think overall the writing quality is incredible. It works so well. I love the way that Brian Lee Durfee writes. He writes extremely good prose. His battle sequences are top-notch. The way he sets up things is so well done. And you know, I've recently saw a video where he doesn't really like plan out his stories in incredible detail like some other people do. And I don't really understand how that's possible in a story like this. The story feels like he outlined everything about the story before he wrote it. So that surprises me. And it shows how skilled he is also, that he's able to pull this off. But the two problems I had in this book, and they're not huge, but I do need to point them out. And one is the constant use of coincidences when characters find each other. So there's a battle that has many hundreds of thousands of people involved. And if you can think about that number, it is an overwhelmingly large number of people. And when the battle finally hits and you have the forces ramming into each other, and chaos erupts. And he writes this visceral scenes that are intense. And one scene in particular, and I won't say anything about it, but when you read this book, you'll know what I'm talking about, is the most vivid, insane, crazy thing I think that I've ever read in a battle sequence, where so many people die so quickly, and then the visual of what's going on and the characters wading through this mess and trying to figure out how to survive is like, it's chill worthy. It'll make you sweat. It's crazy. But this battle happens and characters get split up, but very often these characters are just finding each other in the middle of this battle, and all the characters we know and love are like forming up and grouping up, and they'll be stuck in a random cave and everyone's dying around them. Oh yeah, here pops in another one of their friends. It's like, really? You know, I get that the story needs that, but it just felt like we had this real story that all of a sudden became unbelievable all of a sudden. And the other thing that I had a problem with, especially in this book, was the over-explaining of major moments that happened. And so, you know, this book's not written for children. This is a very adult fantasy book, and you have to presume that the people reading this book have probably also read fantasy before and understand the implications of major things that happen. And so these huge reveals will happen. And as the reader, I'm reading it going like, oh damn, that just happened. That's awesome. Now I get it. But then Durfee will go and then have characters explaining that event to other characters for clearly the benefit of the reader in case they missed it. You didn't miss it. You would never miss it. And then they'll explain it in more depth. And it's like, man, just hit me with it and let's move on. Assume that the reader understands you and is following along with you. But it's almost like he just kind of handholds you along in a book that doesn't handhold you for 99% of it. It just strikes me as odd the moments that it does happen. And it almost kind of lessens these huge events from happening because it's like, look, it happened. Let's just keep going. That being said, that does not take away from the incredible nature of the story, and I am nitpicking when I say those things. So now finally, the most important criteria is my enjoyment. Did I enjoy this book? Hell yeah, I enjoyed this book. This book is crazy good, and like I said, it's one of the top 5 fantasy books that I've ever read in my entire life. Go pick up this trilogy. Just go buy them all right now. If you like a grimdark story, you don't need to see if you like it. You're gonna like it. Go buy all 3. They're awesome. This book, I believe, comes out on November 31st. I got an advanced copy of it, and I'm really thankful that I did because I have been itching to read this story. It's been my #1 most anticipated read of this year. So to be able to read it early, I'm very thankful. Go do yourself a favor, treat yourself, get these books, they rock. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for bearing with me, and as always, happy reading to you.